welcome to a special edition of the Doomsday Podcast, coming to you from the Star in the players' meeting room with defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus. Brian Schottenheimer's the new head coach. He's brought in 17 new assistant coaches. That includes you, even though you're not really new. You were here before for what? It's been 7 years since you were here?
Yes, I was here for 7, gone for 7. So
came under Rob Ryan and worked under Rod Marinelli,
yes, sir.
I believe, if I'm correct in my facts.
That's correct.
You were here from 2011 to 2017, first 5 years as a linebackers coach. Then you became the passing game coordinator. In your final 2 seasons with the team, you were actually calling defensive plays, as I seem to recall it. Then you left for the Colts, where you were supposed to work with Josh McDaniels but never did, for reasons we'll never explain. And in your first year as a Colts defensive coordinator, Indianapolis went from, get this, 30th in points and yards allowed to number 10 and 11, respectively. The run defense, remember this, went from 26th to 8th, and the Colts did not allow a 100-yard rusher in any game that season. Only once in the past 7 years has an Eberflus-led defense finished outside the top 10 in takeaways during your time as a head coach in Chicago. The Bears, 75 takeaways, tied for the 6th most in the NFL during that period of time. How would you define your defense? Like, what's the identity of your defense?
Yeah, the identity goes way back. I mean, we're talking back to the 96 Buccaneers, and that's where it goes back. This is the origin of it. And as you remember, those guys are packed with Hall of Famers and a bunch of great players, and the system allows you really to, play free. It's a disciplined defense, and it allows a lot of eyes on the quarterback, and that's where you get all the takeaways from. And it's very detail-oriented, and that's what I took from Coach Marinelli when I was here with him. Took it on to Indianapolis and then up to Chicago. But it's been really good, and the guys love playing in the system because it really maximizes their talents and helps them really produce on the football field.
And the emphasis is on stopping the run and taking the ball away?
That's it, yep. We got 2 things that we do. We stop the run and take the ball away. We like to score on defense, but that's really what our mantra's been, and that's what it continues to be.
I'm going to allow Matt 1 or 2 questions here eventually.
Yeah.
Don't use them all up in one spot.
I know. I was hoping he'd do more of that intro. I thought we were.
Since we're on a roll here, I mentioned that you just came here from the Chicago Bears. That was your first experience as an NFL head coach, and you joined someone in Brian Schottenheimer who's about to have his first experience as an NFL head coach. He also has an extensive background as an assistant. But given what you experienced, how can you use that to help him, or in what ways has he asked you to assist him in that regard? Yeah,
there's a lot of things as a head coach that you don't know that are involved in the job until you become a head coach. And we just been reflecting on that. If it's with the media or if it's with PR, whatever it might be, practice schedules, way to install the training camp, all those things. And if I see something, I say something. And that's my job as a defensive coordinator, is to help and assist the head coach, and that's what I'm doing here with Brian. And he's been great to work with, high energy, high enthusiasm, high intelligence, and we really made really good progress here in this offseason so far.
One of the experiences you had last year in Chicago was you had Hard Knocks on your campus and in your building. And it seemed to me, as a viewer, that you spent an inordinate amount of time, given that you're a defensive coach, or that's your background, with the number 1 pick in the draft, quarterback Caleb Williams. And yet recently Caleb Williams was quoted criticizing the fact that nobody watched film with him last year. You're the head coach. How do you respond to that?
Well, first and foremost, Hard Knocks, they do a great job. They really do. They stay out of the way.
Because they're going to be here this year.
Yeah, they are. And I've been telling everybody, the whole staff up there, that they do a wonderful job. They stay out of the way, very professional. But back to your other question about the film watching and all that, I would say this, that in the development of the quarterback position, and really all positions, at my time at the Bears, we've always had daily coached film sessions. That was out through the entire year. So that's what I've observed, and that's where it was.
It was interesting that Nick Saban, who you played for and was seen, made the suggestion to any head coach should develop a unique rapport with his quarterback, and it seemed from what we saw that was certainly happening.
Yeah, and again, that's really all I have to say about it. But yeah, that's where it is.
Sorry, Ed brought that up. No, I watched that Hard Knocks, and I really enjoyed it. And it is funny how you start to feel like sort of close to the team, and suddenly a team that I had not really cared about that much because I covered the Cowboys, like I was way into the Bears from watching it. And I'm glad to see the beard up close. You see it on TV and everything.
Well, it's not quite as good as Ed's goatee, but it's close.
It's something to aspire to.
Ed needed some time to grow that out. I am curious about your just impressions of you've been around Micah more and more, and it's kind of funny because I think he's going to have like the worst holdout ever because he's going to keep showing up even if he's holding out, like at Oxnard, and he didn't really have the stomach for it, I don't think. But he's out there, and yesterday he put a helmet on, and it's almost like he just could not stay out of the drills. So just in your brief time, I'm sure you've had some time to sit down with him. What are your initial impressions? You probably had an impression from afar, from maybe coaching against him and all that kind of thing, but now being around him a little bit. What stands out?
Well, I really draw on my experience there because the first time I came here, the linebackers that I coached, were one of them was DeMarcus Ware, right? And that was really good for me in terms of the experience. First of all, I became a very good linebacker coach right away. But and I had Sean Lee and Keith Brooking and Brady James and all those guys and Anthony Spencer. But they did a heck of a job, and they still do a great job in personnel here. But to answer your question, that was really for me the experience that I had to hold everybody else to the highest standard of, hey, that's the best of the best. In terms of a rusher, in terms of a worker, and all those things. Now, Micah has all those. He really does. He has all the work ethic that DeMarcus has. He's got the power. He's not quite as big, but man, he works his butt off, and he loves football. And this guy's got high football intelligence. So I'm excited to work with him, and do some great things with him this year. And when he gets in, he gets in.
Have you already started telling him, how you plan to use him?
Yeah.
Obviously, more coaches have, some coaches like to move him around a lot. Mm-hmm. He seems to be especially good from that left side. Can you share with us kind of what you're thinking about, using him?
A little bit. We had a meeting, him and I had about a half-hour meeting, yesterday on that very subject, him and I in my office. And, for him, you have to move this guy around. Now, what's great about our current roster is that we have other rushers now that can rush. So to pay attention to one particular rusher is going to be more difficult than if you just had one on one side. So that's going to be a good thing too. So we'll have to we can do less of that. So.
And he told me once that he actually thinks his biggest mismatch is rushing inside over the guards and the centers. I assume you'll have that in your repertoire.
Sure. Oh yeah, we'll move him along the line. And Coach Whitecotton. Aaron Whitecotton's our D-line coach and has done a remarkable job here in this offseason, really, and so have all of our coaches. We talk about developing players, teaching the players a scheme, but also develop them on the grass, doing the drills full speed and learning how to torque their body and move and stop and be, have that agility to be able to move on the grass. And that's what we're all about as coaches.
Why have you been so good? You LVE, Sean Lee brought up where linebackers – You've had a lot of great ones, and and they've all talked about how you elevated them to another level. I mean, it was like some of these guys after you left, honestly, didn't stay at that level. Jalen Smith's another one that had some really good times with you. Is that you played the position? Like, why is it that position you've had so much success with?
Yeah, I played the position, and I think that when a guy plays football, at this level, they have a certain camera, in terms of how they see the game. And, some guys are fast processors and some guys, are a little bit, not as fast. Like Sean Lee was as fast as I've ever seen. He could process, like Luke Kuechly and just boom and hit it. But that was through a lot of film study with him and I, right up here doing Breakfast Club together. So, to me, I played the position, so I do have an advantage of how I see the game as a coach. So I can really help those guys to be able to see it. But I think more importantly, it's the skill development. And I told the defense this before they left, and I told them in the beginning, I said, we'll be two things that'll be our separator is going to be our conditioning level and our technique. And the coaches that we brought in, and I'm a stickler on technique and the details of it, but doing it game speed and doing it fast. And that's what I've always done, and that's what I did with Sean and DeMarcus, and that's what we're going to continue to do with this group.
You had other offers to coach this year as a DC. Why did you decide to come back to Dallas?
Yeah, that was easy for me, and again, I did. But I would say, number one, the Jones family, the familiarity with them. I love Mr. Jones, Stephen Jones, and the entire family to be able to come back and work with those guys. I trust them, know them, have a relationship with them, and that to me was number one. Secondly, because when I was visiting with the Cowboys at that time, I really didn't know who the head coach was going to be, because everybody was recruiting everybody during that time. And then really, to me, it was Dak Prescott. When he was a rookie, we drafted him here, and what did he go 9-1 the first 10 games?
13-3, you guys.
13-3, but I think at one point we were 9-1. But I know what's inside his heart and what kind of man he is and what kind of leader he is. So to me, that was a slam dunk. And then when I got the opportunity, when they hired Brian, to meet him, and I was asking around about him because I knew he was up for the job. I got a really good couple friends that are really good friends with him. And they just said, love him. What a great football mind. What a great guy. He's going to be a great leader. And I was all in at that point. And it's exciting, So it's exciting for me to be back, basically almost back home, and because I have a lot of good friends in the area, and it's going to be really good.
What's we keep reading about all the energy and everybody, kind of the coaches and the players, the culture, but the players are really commenting on like this high energy. Has that been almost every staff you've been on, or are you noticing here this feels a little bit different or even maybe more amped up than some of your other stops?
No, it's definitely amped up, and it's what you need. You have to play this game with passion, and it's controlled violence, and you got to be able to have that. And that's the special sauce that you have as a football team, and then doing it together, because you just can't go through the motions, because it'll show, and it'll show on game day. So all we have is what we do on that practice field, and that's our preparation. That's going to be our separator.
I wanted to, just for context, as you talk about some players and some positions and how you see them shaking out as training camp approaches, I just want to provide a statistical sense of where this defense finished last year.
Okay.
Obviously, Mike Zimmer was, and he's like you. He came back here to coach after leaving the organization, and had to deal with prolonged absences of Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence and Deron Bland and Trayvon Diggs. But this defense ranked last in the NFL in touchdowns allowed in the red zone at 75%. No other team was higher than 68%. They were 31st in defensive scoring, allowing 27.5 points a game. Only the Panthers, who set the NFL record at 31.4 points per game, ranked lower. You talked about the run defense and the priority attached to that. The Cowboys allowed 100 yards rushing in 12 of 17 games last year, including season highs of 190 to New Orleans, 274 to Baltimore, 184 to Detroit, 223 to San Francisco, and then to Philadelphia in the two losses, 187 and 179. So this is not an easy undertaking, or so it would seem. What are the moves you think you've made to correct those things, and you can create a defense that is not only part of the reason you win, but maybe sometimes the reason you do win?
Yeah, I think every unit that you have now, because of the way the league's set up, is different every year. So the pieces that I have are different than the pieces that Mike had. And obviously I've watched Mike's defenses for a lot of years, and he's one heck of a coach. And he's had some top 5, top 10, number 1 defenses in the league. But also they had a bunch of injuries. So they had a lot of pieces missing. But again,
and it's hard to win when your pieces that are missing are corners and edge rushers.
Absolutely. So he's one heck of a coach, and he's been for a long time. But so I just want to say that. But also, we've added a lot of pieces here. Through free agency, along the defensive line, at the linebacker level, and in the secondary level. And every group's different. And you really have to restart and retie your shoes, relace up your shoes, as John Wooden would say, every single year. And we want to teach these guys and develop these guys. And we've done a nice job, but we got a lot of work to do. They have to do a lot of work in conditioning over these next 40 days before we touch them again. And then, the coaches got to keep developing their skill sets.
One of the interesting things front office and coaching staff did in the offseason to improve the defense was acquire some former first-round draft choices on relatively inexpensive deals. And like Solomon Thomas, Peyton Turner, two defensive linemen, Kaiir Elam you got from Buffalo, and a trade another former first-round pick who's getting a lot of snaps with the number one group right now. Kenneth Murray, who maybe projects to be your starting inside linebacker. Dante Fowler coming back. Of that group of 5 players, who's made the biggest impression on you, and who are you expecting the most out of?
Well, I would say that the one about that entire group, I would say that veteran presence and to bring that to a young football team was outstanding by Will McClay. I mean, him and his group there do an excellent job, not only in the draft but also with picking up guys like that, and they really did a nice job with that. And to Shadi's credit, also he really brought the coaching staff and the scouting department even closer together, so the communication was excellent during that time. Those guys are really doing a great job with the young guys, because when you have veteran presence, that's one thing, but now let's use them to really help the young guys. For example, Solomon Thomas is helping our 2 young D tackles. Dante Fowler and Peyton Turner are helping Easy, the kid from Boston College.
Donovan is
Donovan. Yep, he's been really great, and he's a very mature kid. And Jay from UCLA and Tommy from Maryland, those guys are all really soaking that in. Then you got Jack Sanborn and Kenneth Murray into that room right there, and we brought 2 young linebackers in. So the veteran presence and the teaching and developing is not just really for the coaches; it's also for the leaders of our football team.
That's interesting. So more specifically, what did Brian do leading up to the draft? Because it does seem like Will McClay was very happy with how this thing went. Maybe some different than some of your other stops. I mean, obviously, you were with the Cowboys, and you remember how it went back then. Anything that felt different that you could kind of give us an example of?
And I told Will this, and I told Shadi the same thing. And again, I've told a lot of people that I was gone for 7 years, and then came back. And when I came back, what I recognized was how great the communication is, in the draft room, in free agency, and with Jerry and with Steven and with the entire Jones family. During the draft process, it's one position, one day, and Mr. Jones and Steven Jones are in there, Will McClay with the position coach, with the coordinator, and of course with Shadi's in there the whole time, and going over every single player, and then whittling it down and then slotting the board. And that's why, our draft was pretty darn good. Same thing with the free agency, which comes first, as you guys know. But it was a great process. The coaches wrote reports. They were able to speak their mind, see something, say something, and just make sure you're on the details. And that's what I noticed that even improved when I was gone. It was that much better when I got back.
Was there any player you were standing on the table for? Was there any during the draft? Was there anything you really found yourself connected to a certain player or passionate about one?
Yeah, I would say Easy. Donald. Yeah, he's at the 44th pick, we got a really good one there. He's exciting to watch. What an athlete, and more importantly, we brought a leader into the football team. So it's really good to have.
Do you see him making a significant contribution as a rookie?
Yeah, I see a lot of rookies that can do it. They're a ways away. We got a lot of work to do, but there's definitely the talent levels there. When
you look at this defense, I think most people would say the biggest concerns you have are at corner right now. You lost Jordan Lewis. We don't know when Trayvon Diggs is going to be healthy enough to play and how well he'll play when he comes off a second major knee injury. Siobhan Ravel, you drafted high.
Right.
Looks like a prototype corner like you want, long, fast, has some size, but when's he going to play? How do you see the cornerback position shaking out?
Yeah, well, first of all, we in the free agency process, we got Kaiir Elam.
Which you traded for him, yeah.
Oh, traded for him. Okay. Yep. Thank you for the correction. But he's
well, he does that a lot,
subtle,
actually.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Hey, Mose, hey, he's here. That's all I know. But yes, traded. But
You don't care how you got him. You just
That's right.
figure it out.
Yeah. But he's done a wonderful job. In fact, I was back here when we coached his dad, Abe.
Yeah, me too.
You know, so and when we did do the trade, I was on the phone with both those guys. You know, talking to his dad, Abe, who I coached here, and then
amazing.
I coached him in Cleveland, and then Kyer, his son, which was cool. But he's done a really nice job of developing, learning our system, and he's a high talent. So we're excited about him. Obviously, Deron Bland is one of the best in the business. And we're excited about him. Man, that kid can move now. He's a good player and a good teammate, and he's a ball hawk, and he does a really good job there. And then you're talking about competition after that. You know, you got a competition for the other spots, and we'll see who slots in at 3, 4, and 5, and 6, and that's what training camp and this off season's for.
Do you have a sense of when Ravel and Diggs might be available to return?
You know, it's right now. We're just waiting to see. We're just waiting to see. The development's still there. They still have the 40 days coming in, and again, we'll have a recheck when they come back in, and then we'll get it from the medical staff.
And I mentioned 2 positions, Matt. Then I'll let you jump in here again. The other position I think is interior defensive line. Obviously, Mozzie Smith was a first-round draft pick 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. He's now in his third different defensive coordinator, which probably hasn't helped his development. What do you see with him and the competition with the 2 young guys you mentioned you drafted late but had high grades on?
Yeah, there's a lot of competition in there. I mean, there really is. We're pretty thick in there, thicker than most people think. You know, so I really believe in that. You know, Osa's done a great job. Mozzie's going to keep it developing. Our D-line staff has done a wonderful job working with those guys. And, so Tommy and Jay are really going to be in there battling. You know, Ernest Brown's going to be in there battling. There's some guys that are going to be battling inside there, for those spots. And you're really looking for, 4 guys or 5 guys that'll be up in game day, mostly 4. And then your defensive ends is typically 5 or 6. But we'll see how that goes as we go through it.
What's the next? I mean, Osa, obviously, he was a big priority. He's become a really good player, and who knows what's next for him. But he seems like Pro Bowl caliber guy that can do a lot.
Yep.
I guess the next thing would be to make him even more disruptive. With a guy with his skill set, are you already thinking about trying to get him up the field more, and as far as disrupting the run game and all those things, or what's that next step for Osa?
He's really developed, and I think he had some comments about that. If I was playing this way, I would have made some more plays, and I saw that, and that's true. He is going to make more plays because of the style that we play. And also we're asking him to step up and be a leader. He's done that, and he's a natural leader anyway. But I think that with his experience, with him signing the new contract, he's viewed as a leader, and he's a great human being. And, he's done a really good job helping those young guys, as we alluded to before.
Obviously, from a defensive point of view, we talked about stopping the run and what a priority that is. You open against Saquon Barkley, who led the NFL in rushing last year with the Eagles. And they've got one of the premier running quarterbacks in football in Jalen Hurts. And then you've got another guy who's a premier running quarterback in football in your division in Jaden Daniels. The proliferation of the running quarterback, how has that affected the way you try to scheme defensively over the years?
Yeah, I mean, it's really like, it's responsibility football. If you have a guy that's responsible for the QB scramble, you have to have that. And then if you got a guy that's responsible for the quarterback disconnect, or I coached college football for 17 years. This is my 17th year in the pros, so I've seen a lot of ball. So it's been really just a responsibility football. I know it's an easy answer, but that's what it is. And the guys that play discipline, play fast, and then understand how their technique and when to use it. That's really how you play good defensive football.
What's your favorite Nick Saban story, if you can go back to your Toledo days?
I have a lot of them.
Yeah.
I have a lot of them, but I'll give you one as a player.
Okay.
So we're in spring ball, and it's 1990, and they're just putting up the towers of the glass bowl. The glass bowl is like goes from the goal line to the goal line, and it's like 5 stories high. The press box is huge. And my father, Stanley, who passed at 75 in 2015, he was an electrician. So he was a foreman on wiring those elevators. So he was up there watching me practice the whole time. So he'd be watching, I said, aren't you supposed to be working? But he was the foreman. But he got the job done. So we're the first it was the first spring practice, and everybody's in there watching and stuff. And they ran I was playing inside linebacker, of course, and they ran a trap. You all know what a trap is when they trap the guard. They act like they're blocking the front side guard, and they come up to the second level, and then they trap from the backside guard, right? So, and it was like a fullback trap, right? So I was taught by all my guys that I've ever talked to about linebacking play, and I was playing then. I stepped up. You just got to step up and run through when you get a trap. And, man, I hit this kid right under the jaw, and it was made this big cracking noise, right? So, and I put him like this right on his back, and I was like, I was celebrating when I was over top of him, and then I hear this guy hitting me in the back, and I look up, and it's Coach Saban. I look like that. I can still see his face. He's got the maize and blue, the gold, the gold and blue Toledo Rocket thing on. And I looked up, and he said, he looked at me, stared me right in the face. He said, "Don't worry about that play. Worry about the next one." So he was always like, "Move on to the next one."
No celebrating success.
He just wanted you to wire in. And, man, he did a great job. We won the championship that year. And my dad later asked me, he said, "You know what?" He goes, that was a big noise that made,
He's glad it wasn't you.
No, it
on
wasn't.
The receiving end.
It wasn't going to be me, I'll promise you.
You made a lot of tackles, by the way. I was looking that up. You had a great career there.
Yep. And I was here when Sean Lee broke the record for Leroy Jordan.
Oh, wow.
Yep, it's 21. Tied it.
In a single game.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I believe I want to say New York Giants. Yep, because I always would mess with Sean. I said, Sean, when I was in college, I had 22. And he's like, "Wow, I don't know about that. It's padded stats."
What college did you play at?
That's right.
Compared to
I played at Toledo. He played at Penn State. So there you go. He has the upper hand.
Competition might have been a little stiffer for
I don't
him
know.
on a weekly basis.
Mac is pretty good competition.
Hey, we
actually.
had a good player when I coached into Mac. His name was Randy Moss. I think he's pretty good.
Yeah, he was good. Did you ever have to cover him?
Yes, actually we did in the '98. It was a '98 MAC championship. I believe it was '98. Yep, we were down in Huntington, West Virginia, playing them. We were doing so good in the first half, but
he got away on you.
He got away.
Jerry had somebody wait up there with him on the draft, like for a week and a half leading up to the draft, and had somebody stay with Randy, and even on draft day was there. And I think there was some thought they might take him, and they became one of the several teams that did not take him. And they got Greg Ellis, who was a pretty good player, and Greg's a great guy,
and they suffered the consequences of that decision when he had 3 touchdowns on 3 catches and 200
I'm
yards.
I'm sure that every one of those teams that didn't pick him, were shooting themselves in the foot. So
yeah, because he didn't go to like 18 or yeah.
So what are your, as we close this out, what are your expectations as far as the overall football team and its ability to compete for a division title, which, Dak Prescott, you mentioned how important he was in your decision. He has won the division, he's 4 times in the 6 years been fully healthy recent years?
Yeah, in terms of expectation, honestly, we were just focusing on competing every day and getting better every day. And that's really what you can control. And that's going to be our mantra, and that's going to be our mindset for the coaching staff, for the leaders of the football team, for our entire football team. And, to look farther beyond that, I know it's coach speak, and I understand that. But, man, that's how we got to live life. You really got to live life that way. Because if you don't, you start looking in the clouds, boy, you trip up. You start looking down, you run into a wall. So you got to make sure you got your eyes right where they're supposed to be and focusing on the task at hand, and that's us getting better one day at a time.
I would have been tempted if I were you to have 1 year, whether you hold up in an analytics barn like McCarthy did at one point, or played a lot of golf and got your full salary. I don't know. Did that even ever enter your mind? Like, hey, maybe 1 year away might be beneficial and that might be interesting, or did you just not even think about that?
Yeah, as you get to know me, and the guys that have been here before do know me pretty well, is that I love coaching football and I love helping the players. And for me to sit out, there's not a way I could have done that. So that's why I'm here.
Well, we're fortunate that you're actually here with us. We appreciate you and the contributions, insight you shared with us on the Doomsday podcast, and look forward to seeing you out at training camp and getting ready for week 1 against the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles on their field.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, Luce.
All right.
Appreciate you.
We are Rogue Media Sports.